John Dewey, an influential American philosopher, psychologist, and educational reformer, made significant contributions to the philosophy of education, particularly through his work Democracy and Education, written in the year 1919. Dewey's work is rooted in his belief that education plays a pivotal role in the democratic society. He was a proponent of progressive education and believed that schools should be places where students not only acquire knowledge but also develop the skills to participate meaningfully in a democratic society. Dewey's ideas challenged traditional educational systems, which he saw as rigid, authoritarian, and disconnected from real-life experiences. Dewey was born in the year 1859 in Burlington, Vermont, in the United States. He was raised in a middle-class family, where intellectual curiosity was encouraged, and his early education was deeply influenced by the ideas of naturalism and pragmatism. He studied philosophy at the University of Vermont and later earned a doctorate from the Johns Hopkins University. Dewey's early philosophical influences included the works of Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, and the ideas of idealism and pragmatism, which would form the basis of his educational philosophy. Over time, Dewey became associated with the progressive movement, a broader societal trend aimed at reforming political, economic, and educational systems to promote social justice and democracy. In Democracy and Education, Dewey argues that education is not simply a process of acquiring information but a social process that should prepare individuals to participate fully in a democratic society. He claims that education should foster critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and the ability to collaborate and communicate effectively. Dewey challenges the traditional, authoritarian model of education that emphasized rote memorization and passive learning. Instead, he advocates for a more active and interactive form of education in which students engage with their environment, inquire into the world, and learn through experience. This concept of learning by doing was a central tenet of Dewey's philosophy, and he believed that it was essential for both personal development and the betterment of society. For Dewey, education and democracy were inextricably linked. He viewed education as the primary means of achieving a healthy democracy, and he argued that the values of democracy, such as equality, freedom, and mutual respect, should be reflected in the structure and practice of schools. Dewey was concerned that a lack of engagement in education could lead to passive citizens who were unable to think critically or make informed decisions in the public sphere. Therefore, schools should not only prepare students for the workforce but also foster a sense of social responsibility and civic engagement. He believed that the classroom should be a microcosm of the democratic society, where students could practice democracy through cooperative activities, discussion, and collective decision-making. A central theme in Democracy and Education is Dewey's concept of experience. Dewey defined experience as the interaction between individuals and their environment, with the goal of promoting growth and learning. He believed that education should be based on real-world experiences, and that students should be actively engaged in solving problems, exploring questions, and participating in their communities. Dewey criticized traditional education for treating knowledge as something to be transmitted from teacher to student, rather than something to be actively constructed by the learner. He believed that education should focus on the process of inquiry, where students ask questions, test hypotheses, and reflect on their findings. This approach would not only help students acquire knowledge but also develop the skills necessary for participating in a democratic society. Dewey's views on education were influenced by his broader philosophy of pragmatism. Pragmatism, a philosophical tradition that emphasizes the practical consequences of beliefs and ideas, was a significant part of Dewey's thought. He argued that knowledge should be viewed as a tool for solving real-world problems, and that the value of education lies in its ability to help students navigate and improve their society. Dewey was particularly interested in the ways that education could be used to address social inequality and promote social change. He believed that schools should prepare students to be active participants in society, capable of addressing the challenges and complexities of a modern, democratic world. In Democracy and Education, Dewey also discusses the role of the teacher in the educational process. He rejects the authoritarian model of the teacher as an all-knowing figure who simply transmits knowledge to passive students. Instead, Dewey views the teacher as a facilitator of learning, a guide who helps students engage with the material, explore their ideas, and reflect on their experiences. The teacher's role, according to Dewey, is to create an environment in which students can actively participate in their own learning. This approach encourages students to take responsibility for their education and fosters a sense of autonomy and agency. Dewey believed that when teachers and students work together in a collaborative, democratic environment, learning becomes a more meaningful and effective process. Another important aspect of Dewey's philosophy in Democracy and Education is the idea of education as a social process. Dewey argues that education is not an isolated activity, but rather it is deeply connected to society and the community. Schools, in Dewey's view, should serve as centers of social interaction where students learn not only about academic subjects but also about social relations, cooperation, and responsibility. By engaging with others in a collaborative and democratic manner, students develop the social skills necessary for participating in a healthy democracy. Dewey was particularly concerned with the growing division between the individual and the community in modern society. He saw education as a way to bridge this gap, fostering a sense of connection and shared purpose. Dewey's educational philosophy also emphasizes the importance of creativity and experimentation in the learning process. He encourages schools to create an environment where students can explore new ideas, take risks, and learn from their mistakes. Dewey argues that such an environment fosters innovation and critical thinking, qualities that are essential for both personal development and social progress. He believed that education should not be limited to a set curriculum or rigid structure but should allow for flexibility and creativity in response to the needs and interests of students. This approach is consistent with Dewey's broader belief that education should be adaptive and responsive to the changing needs of society. The concept of democracy is central to Dewey's educational philosophy, and he argues that the process of education should reflect the values and principles of democracy. For Dewey, democracy was not just a political system but a way of life, a method of living together that emphasized mutual respect, equality, and shared responsibility. He believed that schools should be places where students could practice these democratic values, learning to work together, engage in discussion, and make decisions collectively. Dewey was particularly concerned with the ways in which education could promote social equality, and he believed that an effective education system could help bridge the gap between different social classes. By fostering critical thinking and a sense of social responsibility, education could help create a more just and equitable society. One of Dewey's most significant contributions in democracy and education was his critique of the traditional, authoritarian approach to education. He argued that the traditional system, which relied on passive memorization and rigid discipline, was not suited to the needs of a democratic society. In such a system, students were not encouraged to think for themselves or to engage in the kind of inquiry that Dewey saw as essential for learning and citizenship. Dewey believed that education should be more flexible, responsive, and engaging, promoting active participation and critical reflection. By focusing on the process of learning rather than simply the transmission of knowledge, Dewey believed that education could better prepare students for the challenges of a democratic society. In conclusion, Democracy and Education, written in the year 1919, remains one of John Dewey's most influential works. Dewey's vision of education as an active, social, and democratic process has had a profound impact on educational theory and practice. His emphasis on the importance of experiential learning, critical thinking, and social responsibility continues to resonate with educators and policymakers today. Dewey's work in democracy and education helped lay the foundation for progressive educational movements and continues to influence debates on education reform and democratic citizenship. For Dewey, education was not just about acquiring knowledge, it was about preparing individuals to participate fully in a democratic society, fostering the skills and values necessary for personal and social growth.